I'm
Ha-
Dove.
Hello, I'm Daniel, and welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise podcast, a podcast about living with ME and chronic illness, creativity, and making meaning. Hope you're as well as can be this week. How are you, Dav?
I'm pretty wiped out and a bit crashy. It's been quite a week, and it's hot here. We have a heat wave. Yeah, we're significantly much hotter than it should be here. Both the high temperatures and the like nighttime low temperatures are quite high as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, I'm tired today. I hate using the word tired, but I'm not. I don't feel completely exhausted because tired doesn't really kind of define how you feel with ME, does it? But Um, I've had a I've had a better couple of weeks, and it's like it's really hard to say that, isn't it, when you're doing a bit better because it's almost like you feel like you're going to trip yourself up and heading for a big crash. So it's always hard when you do feel a bit better because you sort of trying to balance it all the time with how much you rest, and then it's really hard to rest when you've got a little bit more energy. I'm not saying I've had loads of energy, but I've had a busier couple of weeks, and I've not yet like had the backlash from that in terms of a full-on crash. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've been doing okay. Today I'm a little bit more sluggish, but I don't, that's a funny word, isn't it? Sluggish. But yeah, yeah, but it's yeah, it's been a sort of busy time. My kids are back at school, or they went back yesterday, so that's nice to get back into routine again, really, with that. So yeah, it's been a bit busy our end, but it's nice to be doing this again with you because I've done kind of three episodes in 3 weeks of interviews, and it was just the way that they all fell. So yeah, it's good to be good to get back to doing a usual episode. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I've been
Um,
really enjoying your interviews. And yeah, I know that you're putting so much spoons and effort and work into these interviews, and they're beautiful. It's just been it's I'm so grateful
mm,
for the work you're doing and really reaching out to people who who are trying to find a balance um between how hard it is to do things with ME and like wanting to be doing creative work. And it's um that's something that you really wanted to explore on this podcast, and you're exploring it
mm.
in ways that I think are so meaningful and so needed.
Yeah, and I think it's trying to get the balance, isn't it, in terms of what we focus on? Because we've had quite deep discussions just between us on sort of like the living with ME side of things,
Yeah.
and then we wanted to explore the creativity a bit, and it's just been brilliant having
Yeah.
well three different kind of types of creativity because Sally's been sort of organizing a music concert, which is a kind of creative thing in itself, but it's a very logistical thing. And then Alison, which is also a logistical thing, but with the art project. For anybody who hasn't kind of caught up with the three, I apologize. Sally's from she does Emmy Foggy Dog, and the Foggy Dog is a little stuffed dog that travels all over the world, and then it's sort of photos are taken, and it's to raise money and awareness of ME. And she's also organising a concert called Redefining Gravity, which is a bit of a she's sort of like on the hoof trying to organize venues and acts for this concert and trying to get media involved and all sorts of things. So it's a really exciting thing. And then Alison's project is I would be here if I could, which is an arts project for next summer. Which if you haven't listened, go back and listen to it because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
The idea of having this kind of mirror box to to pop up in various different places all over the summer for representing a person that can't be where they want to be because they've got ME or a chronic illness. And then, of course, we'll probably get on to talking about my conversation with Sarah Boothby as well,
Yeah.
who talked really earnestly and moving. It was a moving conversation about her daughter who died from medical neglect from ME, um, 2 years ago, and but hearing Sarah talk about Maeve and her writing was just a beautiful kind of, and that's the feedback. That's the word that we got from the feedback, actually, from the different people who have commented, just said it was a beautiful thing to watch and to listen to. Yeah. So yeah, very different different conversations, but yeah, really enjoyable and rewarding as well. So yeah, it's been good. Yeah. And an interesting, yeah, just an interesting process as well. Sort of like I'm learning as I'm going along, and we're learning as we're going along in terms of kind of planning and just arranging times to speak to people, and it's not always easy. And I really appreciated Sarah was more aware of my kind of state of being than I was in some ways, because I was kind of like wanting to sort of engage as much as possible in the conversation, but I could tell that my ME was causing me to flag a little bit, but it needed her to point it out to me. And it's so wonderful to have those sort of people in your life, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
And I know it's just a sort of fleeting moment, but yeah, Sarah's like, right, we're stopping now, and I was like, yeah, it's probably a good idea. It's probably a good idea. So for anybody that did listen, it seemed like the podcast just ended really quickly, and we didn't sort of do the usual sort of like subscribe and all that sort of stuff. But it was I think it was a good I think for us it's like really good to just be like really open and really just I'm trying to find more words, but transparent about our own sort of illness as well while we're making the podcast, because I certainly don't want to kind of like put across some sort of persona that I'm pushing harder than I am, and yeah, or that this is easy for me or easy for you, Dov, because it's not, because we put quite a bit of planning into it and things like that, and like we have shared docs, Google Docs, that we kind of like use to sort of plan episodes and things like that. So yeah, we do put planning in, but it's we're trying to streamline it as much as possible so that it doesn't impact us too much as well. So and hopefully it's just us having a conversation that people can listen into. And
yeah, I think
really go on.
Oh, I was just thinking that sorry, I have an itch. I have like a itch, like, anyways, doesn't matter. I when I'm listening to the interviews, I'm thinking about how much people's process is informed by their capacities and by their situation, like Alison Larkman talking about going to art school and having this sort of understanding of a very traditional sense of what it means to do art. And then because of ME, she wound up like having to find alternative routes to creating art. And so both sort of form and content is being shaped by her experience with ME and her capacities with ME. And I think that's so true for our podcast, is that the way that we're producing this and the kind of work we're doing is very much based on our ME experience and our capacities and what it is that we want to kind of share. And I think that we want to be authentic in the sense of like not trying to hide or diminish what it's like trying to do this with ME, and at the same time wanting to create a space that's vibrant, and those are, that can be, it can be a challenge to hold those two things at once when we're both kind of like today. I feel pretty out of it and kind of just flat, and it's hard to know going into the podcast how articulate I'm going to be able to be and how much I'm going to be able to sort of cognitively function, and then also, how much I'm going to pay for, like what the payback is going to be for, I think every time I am in a social situation, my body sort of tries to compensate, or like there's an adrenaline situation that happens that allows me to be social and to function socially. And I think adrenaline for a lot of people with ME is something that like I think of it as a kind of chemical spill that our body then has to spend days or weeks or months cleaning up. So questions of what it means to do a podcast when we both have ME, and how we let that sort of breathe into the space of the podcast itself. And
definitely. And it feels like, I think as well, I hope both of us are in a position where like either one of us can say to each other, hopefully at short notice, actually I'm just too crashy today. So and I think we'd respect that with each other, and I hope any guests that come on in the future, if they if we've got like a day and a time planned, and they, the morning of an episode or whatever, they just say I can't do it today, like I would be like, yeah, that's fine, and we just don't have an episode that week or whatever. And we're kind of, I think we said at the outset we were going to try and do it regularly-ish, and I think that's kind of I think with ME we can't always work to timescales, and I know sometimes the episodes have come out on a Thursday, sometimes have come out on a Saturday. I think last week it was Sunday when we'd sort of finished getting everything tweaked and right for the episode with Sarah. So yeah, I think it's allowing ourselves permission just to kind of do it in the way that works well given our illness, and that
the two things come to mind. One is just like how fast it can happen for me that like I start to crash. Like people talk about sleep pressure, and I feel like there's something with ME that's a lot more intense but similar, which is there's sort of like crash pressure where suddenly my body's just like, no, and it can happen so fast. And it's not like before that there's no crashing happening, but I think for me there are some situations where like the crash comes on so fast and so hard that all I can do is just be like, okay, bye. And I think that's happened with you too, sometimes too.
Yeah,
and then
just like, I've got to go, bye.
Yeah, it's socially awkward, but there's nothing to be done about it. And then the other thing is that sometimes when I'm watching the podcasts, I'm like, I feel myself start to get concerned because you or someone you're interviewing, it's like you can see it in their face that they're starting to sort of get wiped out, and I get this sort of like I want to do something and there's nothing I can, it's just but you can really I think it's funny because people say people with ME don't look sick, and I think that's absolutely absurd, but I think you have to kind of be attuned to what it looks like with ME to be losing steam or just to be low spoons or to I think anyways.
We had we've had somebody that's been commenting on our episodes, and I love the idea of people finding our channel either on YouTube or the podcast, and then like binge listening to it, and I think somebody's done that because Fiona's been commenting on various different episodes over the last few days, and it's been nice sort of seeing them pop up. But she actually commented on one that says, "This channel is like finding water in the desert. Thank you so much," and I love the name. And it's always funny because whenever I've had a guest the last few weeks, whenever I say welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise, and you just see that smile in people's faces, because it's just like and Vlad when he did it, I could just see this sort of smile on his face when I did it, and it was just like, yeah, this is absurd. It's an absurd name, but it's kind of representative of somehow living with ME and the absurdity of living with ME, isn't it, somehow? So, and then Kags on Twitter said it's lovely to feel a connection to people through the podcast. It feels like being a tiny part of the world again. thank you, and Dov, so much for doing it. And yeah, we really appreciate that feedback, because it encourages us to want to. And I think that's the big one of our big motivations, is that we want people to feel that they're they're part of something, but that they can identify with what we're going through and what we're living with and managing it on a day-to-day basis. And it's the little things sometimes, isn't it, that kind of um the something that we might just say about our experience, that people think, oh, they get it, and that's so relatable. And I think we live in a society where ME is so misunderstood and so misrepresented, that actually it's nice to have this little sort of pocket of space where we just get each other. And I think that's been the case with the guests and things like that, and hopefully going forwards, where it's just like, yeah, we get it. And I hope people listening can feel that as well. So
Yeah, and we also have been thinking about sort of, because I think most of the people we're talking to have, first of all, I want to say that the categories of like mild, moderate, and severe are very wishy-washy. Like, that's probably not the right way to put it, but it's most people don't fit neatly into an ME category. And I think for me, I'm homebound. I can go on like a fun outing maybe 1 or 2 or 3 times a year, which means just like going down the block and taking some photos at the Botanic Gardens. Like that's, so I'm mostly in bed, I'm homebound, but there are many ways that I don't fit into the severe ME category, because I can make my own meals, and I'm able to putter around. I am able to socialize, and so I think we've been thinking a lot about, for people with the kind of profoundly severe ME, where it would be very challenging for somebody to be on a podcast episode, and maybe even not possible to have a conversation. We have been thinking of ways that we can make space for people with profoundly severe ME, and we're definitely sort of still very much a work in progress. But we know you're out there, and we care about you, even if you don't have the capacities to engage with us. We love engagement when it's possible. And so, we'd love to hear from you when you're able. And, if there's somebody out there who feels like in this structure, it would be impossible to, be on the podcast, but you would like to share something on the podcast, we would love to hear from you. And we're interested in finding ways of making the space available to people with I think Dan and I both have a certain, even though our ME is pretty severe, we also have certain capacities that make it possible for us to do this podcast.
Yeah, and like I was talking to somebody on Facebook actually recently, and one of my friends, Kirsty, whose poem we're going to read later, but yeah, she challenged us to how to involve people with severe ME more, and I think it's something we need to think about. And like if people want to just say their thoughts, record them onto their phone, and we can get them uploaded to the drive and download them again, or like using Google or something like that, that we can play, day in a life, or just some sort of something creative, because yeah, it would be brilliant to involve people in any way possible, or whether it's just putting art on a website, or do get in touch on the web. The website is pempod, pempod.com. You can contact Dov through the website. You can look at the links on the descriptions for the audio or the YouTube, and you can get our email address for the podcast as well. So yeah, we'd just love to have any involvement as well. So yeah. And that kind of maybe leads on the severe ME thing. because you've been helping somebody this week, haven't you, Dov, in terms of trying to get access to resources and support for medical care. Did you want to say a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
Yeah. So where I live, there is somebody who has a friend with pretty profoundly severe ME who is in the South of the United States and has been struggling to get appropriate medical care. And I think um, it's I've been able to be supportive in certain ways. But what's been really beautiful is that I reached out to several organizations and people for support, as did some other people in their lives. And so we basically have um, heard from people sort of all over the world with um, who in various ways have been able to offer resources and support. So I feel like I'm gathering resources that could help people in similar situations where, but it's been scary. I feel like the sort of amount of fear I feel around the medical neglect, especially around people who are not able to get enough food and who need either a J tube or something similar. I think like to know that there are so many doctors out there will who's sort of, to me, it's arrogance and it's sort of authoritarian mindset where if they don't see something that aligns with their expertise, they pretend it doesn't exist. And so they're seeing these people who are so severely ill and psychologizing it and outright refusing medical care, or refusing care unless there are um, psychological testing. And so I think like it's been a mixed bag, because it's like the kind of fear and frustration and anger that comes along with this medical abuse and neglect, and then but also the beauty of seeing people come together from so many parts of the world and offering care and offering expertise. And so yeah, I feel like I'm collecting documents that could be helpful to people in similar situations, and that feels, I think it gives me a little bit of a sense of empowerment. It's been lovely talking to all the people involved, and I'm trying to keep this anonymous because I don't know who
Yeah,
wants.
yeah.
But and it looks like appropriate care is coming, but it's come at the cost of like caretakers having to work 24/7 and having to like um it's come only with caretakers working hard every minute of every day to make sure the hospital experience is as unpainful and as undistressing as possible, and to get appropriate care. And it shouldn't being in the hospital with ME shouldn't be a near death experience. And
Mm.
it shouldn't be this kind of disaster, and it shouldn't take the health away from caregivers as well. And it's just like you have to be with someone every minute of every day, because they can't advocate for themselves appropriately. With that, it's so I think being in the hospital with ME, in my experience, has always been dreadful, because
Mm.
doctors don't listen to me, nurses don't listen to me. They do things that are painful and debilitating and excruciating. And so it's like you need someone there to sort of advocate for you in the moment to moment, but also like be able to advocate for doctors offering appropriate treatments. And yeah, um it's quite a thing that hopefully is not true at every hospital and in every situation, but I feel really lucky here with my primary care providers are great. But when I've been to the hospital, it's been a disaster. And I,
Mm.
so I think it's brought up a lot for me, both in the sense of like, the beauty of what it's like being in a small community that's connected all over the world of people who really care about each other's experiences and care about each other's get you know we want each we want it. It's like it feels at times, and I think it is true that survival is on the line, and the only thing that's going to keep someone alive is having people advocate for them, and having doctors and hospital experiences where people are made to listen or have the capacity to listen, and that's not always, it's just devastating that there are situations in which the medical system just refuses care, and yeah, so it's been hard, and I think there are things about it that has been really beautiful, but it's also been painful and exhausting, but yeah, I'm really grateful for all the care that's being showed by so many people, and I'm glad that it looks at, like in this case, the person's going to get the care that they need. Thank goodness, um, and also, like, this is not the last time that this is going to happen, and I just wish that the system were set up to provide better doctors and better care and better,
I think it's just the hospital environment is just so overwhelming, isn't it? I went to get a tetanus jab earlier in the year, and I was in there, I wasn't in for very long, but it just feels there's like so much going on in hospitals. There's just the noise, the environment, the sensory overload, and like you're there for a reason because you're too ill to be at home, or there's a reason why you're in hospital. But being in that hospital environment can make you feel much worse generally. So it's just like a double-edged sword. It's like, well, which is better? Kind of being there to get the care you need for, like, whether it's an ME or a secondary kind of condition, or whether it's being at home but then not getting the support you need. It's like there's just no easy answer, is there? And we've got in the UK at the minute, we've got a consultation that's going on, and I'll probably put a link in the description to go and see that consultation. And I need to do it myself. It's just having the time to sit down, read the documentation, and then fill in the online forms. Although quite a few people have been asking for paper copies, and they've been coming in the post, which is really good for accessibility. But yeah, certainly, like, we need as many people to get involved in that, in terms of how the NHS carry out care for people with ME, and how it kind of works, because there's just so little understanding or awareness really of the condition. The amount of times I see on Twitter where people have kind of recounted a conversation with a healthcare professional, whether that's a doctor or a nurse or whoever, consultant, and they've just got no idea about ME whatsoever. Or even like doctors are asking patients what's ME, or what are the symptoms of ME, because they just don't get any training in. And that was something that Sally brought up, I think, in her work with Stripey Lightbulb, where she's educating people, and that's mostly online, but educating people, healthcare professionals, the education sector and things like that, about ME, because the understanding and the impact of post-exertional malaise, I'll get it right, I won't say the podcast, but yeah, how that impacts people is just so misunderstood. It's scary because it can impact people in a massive way. Yeah, and
yeah, I saw somebody posted on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. I am on Instagram. I'm not on social media a lot, but one of their posts was basically about the disparity between what the medical system, there's not that many people in the medical system who have even like subpar understanding of ME, but for people who imagine that they understand ME, their idea of how severe it gets is nowhere close to how severe it actually gets. So I think when doctors see patients who are profoundly severe, it's like they don't believe that it's possible to be this sick. And so they come into the situation with this sort of, I'm going to use the word arrogance again, because I do feel like it's that it is arrogance that makes it so that a doctor has an incapacity to believe a patient's experience. And it was just a meme, but I found it to be really meaningful because there's this disparity between how sick people with ME can get and how sick a lot of doctors believe that people with ME can get. And this is for doctors who even like have any understanding of ME. And then of course there are doctors who, for some reason I can't understand, have no understanding of ME at all. And yeah, so I think that in this situation that I was just sort of involved in to some degree, there was a situation where doctors were seeing a profound, a very severe case of ME and refused to believe that somebody could be this sick. And what are the mechanics behind that sort of failure to see somebody who's profoundly sick and acknowledge that they're profoundly sick, and rather than like people sort of, I think a lot of medical people approach ME and probably long COVID with a certain amount of defiance because severe chronic illness of this kind is, I think, in some ways, people have learned or have taught themselves to be hardened to it and to be callous and to like refuse to believe. And then when they refuse to believe, they refuse to do certain kinds of tests or offer certain kinds of care. And it's like, I forget where I started and where I was going, but do you remember where this all?
I think we were talking about the just medical professionals' views of people with ME, and yeah, like it was interesting that there was a tweet this week by somebody who said that they'd spoken to, or it might have even been, yeah, I think they'd spoken to a doctor who had long COVID, and the doctor basically admitted that they didn't believe that ME really was a significant condition, and up until they got long COVID themselves, and then they were living with it, and it's like, and there was some comments that were a bit like, oh well, it's kind of hope they learn now and stuff, and like I don't necessarily want to take that approach because for anybody to get ME or long COVID, it's terrible and devastating. But there is this sense that until it impacts maybe somebody themselves, they can't, because there's not clear diagnostic routes or treatment plans or the psychologization of it. It does mean that kind of there's this supposed mystery amongst medical professions about ME because of the lack of training and understanding. And because they don't think that there's any clear way of kind of telling whether people have got ME or not. And I mean, just ask us. Do you know what I mean? Just like we could tell you about the post-exertional, neuroimmune exhaustion or whatever you want to call it, and how that impacts us. And surely that that in itself, but yeah, and hopefully things like Decode ME and things like that will hopefully shine a light or find reasons. But that we're still a long way from any sort of treatment, aren't we? And yeah.
Yeah, I think for one thing that I get frustrated with, and maybe this is not true, but I have this sense that people are so interested in finding a cure that they're not putting enough effort into, like, how do we promote the best quality of life possible? Like, care for there are some ways that I would like us to be focusing on care for people who are sick as much as we're focusing on a cure, because um, I think it's just as important. Like, we don't know if or when we're going to find a cure. We do know that people are sick and that they need um, care of us, like that. I just wish there were a lot more resources to support people who have
Mm,
ME, and to support appropriate care, and improving quality of life to the degree that it can be improved. I think, like,
mm,
and the other thing that I'm wondering about, that I want to look into, is sort of what kind of data we have on the effect of medical neglect. Like, are we collecting data and doing
mm,
studies on the effect of medical neglect on people with ME, and the dangers of medical neglect, and how. So I think, like, yeah, I think my focus tends to not be on finding a cure or even finding biomarkers, but it's on, like, acknowledging, believing that people are sick. And I do think we have, I do think that we have ways of diagnosing that are quite generally pretty good and accurate. And if there's
mm,
something else going on, tests generally tend to find that. But like, I would like to see a lot of resources going into care and support um, of people who have ME, and that should be just as important. And I don't know enough to know that sort of how different kinds of um, money is being spent in terms of trying to help people with ME. But yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's it just feels disheartening sometimes when um there's like specialist MS nurses that go out to see people or do like an annual you know catch up with people with MS, and and there's none of that for ME over here, and some of that is maybe partly funded by MS charities, but um certainly a large chunk of it is funded by the NHS, and it does feel very much. And I'm not like comparing illness one condition with another, but it does feel that with those of us with ME, very much kind of like the forgotten um, sector. Because like I don't know, like if an ME nurse came to see me, and it was about we've got rid of all the graded exercise and CBT and all that. I don't know what they could say, but I think it would just be the sense of being listened to and being heard that would help me
Yeah.
a lot. Like, and that was part of my job as a social worker when I was working with foster carers. I would go and, I didn't have all the answers in terms of working with these really challenging kids, but I think the foster carers that I worked with had a sense of being listened to and being heard about the challenges that they were facing. And I think for many of us with ME, it feels like we're not heard, we're not listened to, um, our views aren't taken on board, and health services are really inaccessible. And there's got to be some sort of change in that. And I hope certainly in the UK that this government consultation will sort of move things on a little bit in the way that health services approach people with ME. Um, like my mum asked me yesterday, oh, when did you last see a doctor? And I was like, I can't remember when I actually saw a doctor, and probably last spoke to my GP. It could have been a year ago. So there's just nothing. Do you know what I mean? We're living with this incredibly debilitating condition that, you know, it was interesting because we were talking about sort of severe, mild, moderate, earlier, and I feel like I sort of move up and down the scale a little bit in terms of sometimes I'm in the top end of severe, and I'm like spending most of my time in bed, and yeah, like you saying, just about making a meal, and then I feel like I've moved a little bit up into moderate recently, where a little bit higher into moderate, where I have been out a couple of times recently, but it's sort of like really incremental, isn't it, in terms of that the sort of the shift in sort of tiny shift in energy levels gives quite a significant, sometimes sort of like improvement in quality of life, um and yeah, it would just be nice to sort of see a slow improvement rather than like feeling for me that potentially in another week or two's time it could all come crashing down again,
Yeah.
and then I'm really struggling again. So it would be nice to talk to a health professional about that and
Yeah.
how I manage that, just in terms of kind of reminding myself that I need to I mean I think, and I think you're pretty good at managing your levels and stuff like that, and I think I've, you know,
I
we've been in this a while now, but it's still a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm good at managing my levels. I think I just don't have the capacity to do the things that would really mess me up. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I think that
yeah,
if I
yeah.
had a little more capacities, that I would definitely do things that would then cause me to crash harder. I
Mm,
think that's one of the tricky things is that, I think a lot of people who like to imagine that chronic illness is easy to quote fix. Like people who have kinds of magical thinking around, imagine that everyone can get better if they try the right thing or if they do this or if they believe this. I think I think what those kinds of people with those narratives in their head don't understand that like a lot of chronic illness is an illness of fluctuation, and you are going to have better days and
mm,
you are going to have worse days. I mean, I think there are a lot of people with ME who never have a good day, but I think there are some people with ME who do have the capacity to do things, but then um, get clobbered by post-exertional mayonnaise. Or like their baseline changes. Like your baseline can get better or worse. I think one thing that's sort of interesting with my experience is that my baseline is never such that I can like I can never have a day where I actually go out and like spend a day on the town. I can't
mm,
travel without really getting being in the car is hard. If I go on an outing, we're talking about an hour or two, usually like an hour or
yeah,
two, very close to my house, which takes me usually weeks to recover from. And it's the baseline, the idea of the baseline, it's not, um, the a baseline is an idea. It's an approximation, and we don't always know when our baseline is getting better or worse.
mm,
And there are ways that I think like since I moved 3 years ago, my baseline has not ever gotten back to where it was before the move, but it's not in every area of my life. Like I'm able to do a lot of things that I was able to do before the move, but there are certain things that I feel like I'm still, if I do them, I crash out much harder than I did before the move. It's a very complex idea. The idea of a baseline, the idea of how well we're doing, and that we don't have an illness where, for most of us, we're ever going to sort of um, have this journey of getting better and better and better and better and better until we're well. Like our
no,
journey is usually like some of us, our baseline gets better. Some of us, our baseline gets worse. Some of us have great days and then crash out really hard. For me, I tend to have mostly like very low capacities, but enough capacity to do a podcast and,
mm,
but not enough capacity to go out on the town and then like, which could cause a devastating crash. Whereas some people do have the capacity to go out on the town, but then they have a devastating crash from it. So I think if I had those capacities, I probably would struggle just as much as anyone else with like wanting to go do stuff because I feel well enough to, and then having to deal with
mm,
potential devastating crash afterwards.
mm,
Does that make sense?
mm, yeah. And it's really hard because I think I'm in the stage where I can maybe go out um for a meal, which I have done recently, but then even when I'm out, I'm not necessarily I'm enjoying it in a sense because I'm enjoying the food and I'm chatting, but like I can feel like really on the edge and really out of it as well. And it's like, how much is it worth it? Because it's not, and it's a bit like what Alison was talking about with I would be here if I could. It's that sense of actually, because I think she said that sometimes people with ME or chronic illness can do things and sometimes they can't, and I think it's recognizing that as well. But for me, even in the doing things, it's not doing it with a sense of lightness of spirit and enjoyment and energy
Right.
fueled. So it's not the extremes. It's like I'm doing it because I want to do it, and I'm glad I did it, but I'm not sure that I totally enjoyed it at the time because it's like it's that sense of the sensory overload, all the sort of stuff that comes in
Yeah.
and around, and it does make it really challenging, and so life feels like it's um just all about making decisions as to whether something's worth it or not, and that's really difficult, isn't it? Because it's like, is this
Right.
worth it? How much payback am I going to experience? Am I going to
Right.
experience payback? Am I going to get lucky this time and actually not feel too bad? Or is it like a half a day crash? Is it like a week's crash? Um,
Right. Is it a
yeah,
month
can I
or
do
a
what?
year?
Yeah, well, exactly. And like, can I do the same as what I did last week? Maybe I can, but maybe the effects will be worse this time, even though I did the same thing. And
Right.
it's the total unpredictability of it, isn't it? And yeah,
Yeah.
the other thing is I made a music video this last weekend, which was fun, and the song that I'd written and recorded is that sense of the chorus is it's a day by day type of living. Tomorrow's just drifting away, and it's like there's never a sense that you can plan and say, okay, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go there and I'm going to enjoy that, and or I'm going to go to
Right.
this concert, or I'm going to go to this football match, or I'm going to live, I'm going to go to work even. You know what I mean? It's like, um, it's always a case of like living day by day with Emmy, isn't it?
Yes.
I know we're just like chewing the cud here, really, but I hope people listening can really relate, or even if you're listening and you don't have Emmy, and
Yeah.
hopefully just our random sort of musings can help you understand a little bit more. We've been a bit all over the place, but
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Can I jump? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, one thing that there's a Yiddish saying that basically translates to "man plans and God laughs," except in Yiddish it rhymes. And I think making any kind of plans with ME is sort of an existential joke. But that's
Yeah.
what I want to say is like, I think it was Tom Kinlan posted something recently about disability and how a lot of people have this sort of strange black and white thinking about like disability means you can't do something, like you can't see, you can't hear, you can't walk, whereas disability is generally a much more subtle thing. Like maybe you can walk, but if you do, you're going to be crashing out for 3 days and be in a lot of pain and potentially going to get injured from falling. So, you use a wheelchair because it's safer and it preserves your strength and it keeps you from getting injured. And maybe you can see a little bit, like you can see enough um, to that, like having a certain apps on your phone. It's like there are a lot of people out there who have a lot of sort of rage towards people who are disabled, and particularly
Mm,
policing. Like, how can you say you're blind if you're looking at your phone? Or how can you use a how can you use a wheelchair when I saw you stand up? And there's actually a lot of violence towards people who are
yeah.
disabled because of this strange black and white thinking. But I think as with ME, um, it's not that it's not that I can't leave the house. Like I can leave the house if I absolutely have to, but I'm going to pay for it. And yeah, like Dan was saying, like I have to think so hard about like what am I going to do, because what are the consequences, and do I want to be in a month or years long crash? Um,
Mm,
because I have, like, from going to doctor's appointments, I've had, I have had a years long crash from going to a doctor's appointment. I'm glad I went, but like, I think the question is not always, can I do this thing? I think the question of what it means to be able to is very strange with ME because, I might be able to go on a car ride today, and maybe even enjoy a little of it when I'm not feeling sick and when I'm not like stressed out about the cost of it. But it could take me, I think the last time I went on a car ride for fun to take photos, I think it took me like at least 2 or 3 months to recover. And so,
Wow.
yeah, I think how can we help people as a culture think differently about chronic illness and disability and stop having this black and white can or can't. It's like, I think something like over 90% of wheelchair users are ambulatory wheelchair users, and yet
Mm.
there's this cultural narrative that gets sort of hammered into people's heads that if you can use a wheelchair and stand up, you're faking being disabled, and it's, I
It's a
think it's a,
miracle.
what was that,
Sorry,
Dan?
I said it's a miracle.
It's
I
a
think
right.
that's
It's a
that.
effing miracle. Like
Yeah,
it's, yeah.
yeah,
You were.
yeah.
I think you were going to say something when I was going on and
No, no,
on.
and then I just jumped in and I can't remember what I was. Yeah, yeah. We've probably talked long enough, haven't we? But
Yes.
we did. We don't. I might insert inserts inserts the I don't know if that's the right word because I was gonna say I might insert the advert. And
Oh, and
yeah,
poems, right?
yeah. So we've got a poem, but what the advert is for the Exhaustion Enterprises. I don't even know how I'm going to do it. I haven't recorded it yet. But I'll put it in here. And yeah, Lou Baker has done a quite a bizarre one, and I don't even know how I'm going to how I'm going to say it because it's. But another friend, Amanda, she came up with this idea of uh, a portable stool. Um, it's it's a stool it's a suppository, so it's like it boomerangs out of your bum, and then you can sit on it wherever you are. Um, but it's absolutely absurd. And yeah, so when I said insert, it's yeah, we'll we'll play that now.
So a double entendre.
Yes, yes, a stool. So I'll play that now, and then we'll come back.
Exhaustion Enterprises.
A friendly word from our sponsors here at Exhaustion Enterprises. Along with our team and genius idea incubator Amanda Francie, we have developed the first of its kind, introducing the Boomerang Support Stool Suppository 2000. What makes this different to all other suppository stools, we hear you ask? It's all in the unscientifically not yet proven aerodynamics of gyroscopic precision based on the spin angular velocity due to the leading edge having higher airspeed. Who wants a stool that is shot 20 meters away when you have chronic illness? Who can walk that far? Does this not contradict the whole purpose of the anal stool in the first place? Of course it does. Why waste money on a stool that won't come back to you when you shoot it out? Key features include built-in flashlight for easy insertion, vibrating heat setting, pairs to your phone and other devices, and can be used with the app Find My Stool for compulsive overshooters. Compact and light so you barely know it's even up there. Aerodynamically designed to return upon an expulsion. Sequined seat for that extra razzle-dazzle. Fluoro green for visibility. Proctologist endorsed in Mulvania. Trapdoor pants are recommended but sold separately. Batteries not included. A squeeze and a push and straight out the tush. It's literally that easy. For optimal results, use after a bowel movement. Disclaimer: EE assumes no responsibility or liability for bowel perforation.
Exhaustion Enterprises.
Yes, so your boomerang stool. Um, I don't know what was going on in anybody's mind when that idea came up, but yeah, it feels like our Exhaustion Enterprises company has just gone a bit into the realms of absurdity, but we love it. We love it. And if you've got any ideas for a product that um, a totally impractical, ridiculous product that Exhaustion Enterprises could try and sell to chronic illness people, then then do send us your suggestions, and I'm sure Lou would, kind of health permitting, do a brilliant graphic for that, and yeah, come up with new ideas. So, um, but yeah, returning to something a little bit more serious. Should we finish on the poem that Alison? No, not Alison.
Yeah, I did I just want to go back to what I was just saying for 1 second.
Sorry,
I think that for a lot of people with ME, there is a lot of can't that is like 100% can't. Like I 100% can't walk through a grocery store and stay upright at this point. You know what I mean? Like I think there are things that like, I guess like how do we think about the sort of complexity and subtlety of disability, and I know we talked a bit about disability and ME and you know like how ME might fit into a disability sort of theory, but for me, you know, I guess I'm not saying that there are not things that people absolutely 100% cannot do. Those things do exist, but there's just also a lot of grayer area where somebody needs to use a wheelchair and can also sometimes stand or even walk a few steps or even, you know, like, so yeah. So I didn't want to make it sound like, I don't want to make it sound like people can do things necessarily.
No.
But yeah, I'm not sure how to.
No, I hope nobody would think you were saying that. I think it's that whole thing about ambulatory wheelchair users exist, and I think it's like, you know, a wheelchair or a mobility scooter or a walking stick or a cane or whatever is a really practical solutions for a lot of us in different ways to minimize the impact of post-exertional malaise and the subsequent symptoms that come with it. But I think that society doesn't see that and don't understand the impact that, you know, the fact that by using those things we're minimizing the potential for like serious health decline, and that
Right, and
that's the key, isn't it?
yeah, and it's like, for me, I can stand and I can walk a few steps, but then my blood pressure will drop, and if I'm not sitting, I will pass out. You know, and so it's, and I know there's a lot of different conditions besides ME where there are so many reasons to need ambulatory assistance in getting moving around. My brain is not working because I'm crashing out, but
yeah, mobility.
But yeah, it's like it is not safe for me to be on my feet for more than, you know, depending where I am, depending the circumstances. It's not safe for me to be on my feet. I'm going to fall. I'm going to pass out after a certain point, and like, and there are some people with ME who can't stand at all. And there are people with ME who can't sit up or can, you know, sit up very little. And, you know, everybody's situation is very different, but yeah, I think we live in a culture that wants to force this narrative that if you can do something, you should do it. And with ME and with a lot of other situations, that is a very dangerous way to think about abilities or whatever, or capacities, or yeah. There are a lot of things that, yeah.
And then it's getting the balance in like making life worth living as well, isn't it? Because sometimes doing something can have a big impact, but actually, like for our mental health, it keeps us going. Like, you know, sometimes I could go out, but it would keep me going my mental health going for like months. The fact that I did something
Yeah.
with myself, rather than like getting 6 months into the year and thinking, what have I done anything this year of note, or
Right.
like I think we've talked before about almost having like milestones to say, oh yeah, that happened. And like life can just feel like just one big blur otherwise. But then by doing that thing, does it mean that our overall quality of life goes down, but we
Right.
don't have
Like
any
for
quality
me,
of life to start with?
yeah, I think for me, like I'd much rather not go out and do things and have a better day-to-day quality of
Yeah.
life rather than do something that's going to mean that I'm going to have to spend a month where I can't socialize. And that can you know what I mean? Like if I overdo it, it's possible that I will spend a month or months in bed and not have the capacity to socialize. And that really negatively affects my mental health. So, I think like, and I think for some people, quality of life with ME is it's a lot of work to kind of, to navigate the existential bleakness of ME and I think surviving ME for a lot of us is sort of a full-time job. Is like, how do we create an environment and in a world in which we can thrive just a little bit, or in which we can survive. It's having ME can be a very bleak place to live, and so a lot of people with this illness put a lot of work into like finding the sometimes very small ways that we can have some quality of life. And I think for me that means staying at home, resting, and not doing things that cause me months long crashes, where I don't have the capacity to do the little things every day that bring me joy, like this and talking to friends and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably a good place to stop. But
Yes.
I'll read Kirsty Shivapalan's poem, and I think she's really written it in response to some comments by Anthony Fauci this week. What's his actual role? Is he the head of? What's
He
his?
was. I thought he stepped down as head of the public health. He's been in that role for decades. I thought he stepped down, but in any case, he really put his foot in it the other day. Although I don't know if he knows that he really put his foot in it.
Yeah, and there's a sense that he's. It's interesting, isn't it, how things that people say in the US and in America can impact people all over the world in the same way things that happen in the UK to do with health policy or whatever impacts people all over the world, because other countries then take a lead from those countries. And but yeah, he'd made comments this past week about vulnerable people will die, and almost that has to be
from COVID.
Yeah, from COVID, and that being is acceptable the right word? I don't know. A
Yeah, he was
byproduct
basically
of.
like, "We're doing great because only vulnerable people are dying. So yay, we don't have to worry about COVID. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Only vulnerable people are dying. Nothing to worry about here." And yeah, it caught like in disability communities that I am connected to on Instagram, like people are, rightfully like horrified. It was
Yeah.
horrifying.
Yeah. So Kirsty's poem, I don't know if there's a name to this one actually. I don't. I'm sorry, Kirsty, if I didn't write the name down, but yeah, I'll just read it. Poppies are used to symbolize death through conflict. They grow tall and wild by the wayside. Their red petals signify the blood we all share. People lost to war, great and deadly, numerous and petty, sacrifices deemed necessary for abstract nations to flourish. Did I miss something? Are we at war again? When was when was it I appeared on the wrong side of the equation? Taking care of others I was taught was our birthright. but that side of humanity has been boxed and shipped into space. Humans now mourn what is more easily lost, invisible unless tucked away, slipped behind promises of growth for the contented. We will only be numbers one day, studied like poppies, remembered and recited by rote, collected and counted, tall and wild by the wayside, by distant streaked faces of history. Yeah, yeah, we've talked quite a bit today about kind of like society's perception of ME or chronic illness, and I think the scary thing is that there's a lack of acceptance. It's almost like this could happen to anybody, but oh, it won't happen to me. It won't happen to me, and almost a sense of invulnerability by people that actually this could be their lives as well, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's I think it's quite a poignant poem that Kirsty's written, and thanks for allowing us to read it. And that probably just about sums up today's episode. But yeah, coming up, I'm hopefully going to speak to Jessica Behrman in a couple of weeks' time. She's got a new book coming out, and sort of recounting. She's written 2 books talking about her experience of very severe ME actually when she was younger, and then the last one was sort of talking about how she met her husband and the challenges of kind of being a young woman, and yeah, it'll be interesting and exciting to hear about, because she writes so well, about her creative processes in writing and what she's got planned for the future as well. So yeah, do look out for that one, and we'll be back soon. Was there anything you want to add, Dov? Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, just really grateful for the last interviews you did, and I highly recommend people watching those interviews with Sally Calloway, Alison Larkman, and Sarah Boothby. Just all very different, but yeah, really beautiful. And listening to Maeve's writing, and it's also, there's on the website, you can also access the text if you want to read it, or you can listen and read at the same time.
Yeah, because I think quite a few people have watched the because we split that one into 2 parts. I think quite a few people have watched the first one and maybe have got like intentions then to sit down, and it is lovely because it's kind of almost like part 2 is like just listening to an audiobook for an hour. So if you can manage it, do that, because Sarah reads it so beautifully, and I was just like transported into a different, sort of different world. So do that, and thanks for listening today, and we'll speak to you again soon. All right.